Very few games keep me genuinely smiling, entertained, and invested the entire way through, but Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney was definitely one of them, and I don't say that lightly. Outside of a few moments that left me scratching my head in the gameplay department, those were quickly remedied with how the story presented it, and everything else was so neatly done. Ace Attorney is the sort of game you might not expect to be as atmospheric and enveloping as it might seem at first glance. Sure, the anime visuals are catchy, the idea of playing as a lawyer who must defend his clients is a unique premise for a game, but you just wouldn't guess it would pull it off this well, along with a story that puts most modern game releases stories to shame. Taking on the role of Phoenix Wright, the titular up-and-coming defense attorney, your job is to take part in 4 distinct, unforgettable trials, each with their own twisting and amusing tales of murder and mystery. And before anyone asks, yes, with the HD re-release that I played for the review, there is a 5th case included, but that will get its own separate video due to just how different the entire thing technically is from the previous 4 cases. Each of the stories involves murder in one way or another, plenty of memorable characters, and naturally a mystery for you to solve. From saving your best friend who had just been framed for the death of his ex, to saving face for a Sentai star, right down to an extremely personal tale of the past coming back to haunt the present, all the cases and stories are interconnected and build, for the most part, extremely well off each other. Sadly, I can't talk about each of the cases too much in detail without revealing spoilers I feel would actually take away from the experience. So, if you're wondering about spoilers or just what I thought about spoiler sections and you've already played the game, you can go to this timestamp featured on screen. Don't worry, I'll warn you about the spoilers again when we get there. In most games, I have an occasionally tough time remembering certain members of the cast in full. Even if it's just a character or two, I still might sadly forget their names. Here, however, I could basically name off the entire cast and how they act, what their personality is, and all that other stuff. That's how strong their presence is. From the skilled newcomer and protagonist Phoenix Wright, to his caring yet intense boss and mentor Mia, to Phoenix's partner and assistant Maya, the well-meaning but sometimes thick-headed Dick Gumshoe, along with Phoenix Wright's cold, calculating rival by the name of Miles Edgeworth, everyone is ingrained in my mind, and most likely never gonna leave it. I love the entirety of the cast of oddball heroes, and despise the antagonists and villains the game threw at me. Naturally, even if there was a character here or there on the more good side of the alignment scale I didn't care for, they still usually had extremely strong character to them. I can safely say though, even with her ending scene, I wasn't too big a fan of Lotta. She can burn in bumpkin hell. Joking aside though, the side of justice was full of characters that I definitely will never forget, and that also goes for the other side of the law. Phoenix's gallery of rogues were all downright despicable, but I couldn't help but love how vile and charismatically devious they were. I don't want to spoil how any of their cases play out, but I have to say that cases 2 and 4 most certainly had my favorite villain payoffs, followed by case 3's lead up to the verdict. With that said, it's definitely safe to say that the writing here is top notch. It managed to blend the lighthearted comedy together with the more serious crime and murder aspects incredibly well, with a fluid meshing of the two, neither overstaying their welcome when the scene asks them to leave. The game is also just so darn quotable, and I see why everyone references lines from the game as much as they do, especially this one. However, some of the localization was a bit wonky, and I really do wish they stuck with the original Japanese themes, instead of changing food and events to be more Western, as it's quite jarring to hear characters bring up the fact that they are in America, with Japanese clearly occasionally in the background. Still, outside of the weird sentence here and there, it can mostly be ignored. Honestly, I could read entire straight-up books of cases based around the universe, as long as the author of the game here wrote them. I could not put the game down, and during my entire time with the game, I only took essential breaks. It was that enthralling. Now, while the game is predominantly reading, verging more onto the visual novel side of things at points, there is still indeed plenty of gameplay. Basically, outside the copious amount of reading on offer, there are 2 distinct gameplay styles that follow the other. First being the investigation portion, where you gather clues and talk to suspects, and then finally the trial. Usually these will trade off over the course of 2 to 3 days before the final part of the court case initiates, signaling the finale of the story arc. Investigating stuff was usually fairly straightforward, with you sometimes picking up clues and other times having to make sure that you check every little thing to have a mental note of something that was there. But thankfully, I never once found that the game would try to lock me out of winning. That's the good part about the game's more linear nature. However, that does come at a price in the courtroom side of things, since sometimes, even though you think a piece of evidence might help, since the game is set up in such a way that all the evidence is linear, it won't always work how you think it might, which isn't always a bad thing. It just means that you'll have to stick with how the game wants to present evidence and not think too far outside the box unless the story demands it. I love talking with people, using clues to get information out of witnesses, and just playing the detective, an element I was surprised was in the game due to the fact that it's sold as you playing as a lawyer. player. Not that you don't stand up for justice in the court of law, as you do, and these segments, bar one or two moments where the game focuses solely on its own in-universe logic, are amazingly fun and hypnotizing. Getting the line of questioning and evidence just right so you get a win is oh so incredibly satisfying, and when you botch a question, it's definitely ego-bruising. The only real flaws I had with the gameplay itself was the fact that sometimes the controls were a bit sticky, and going from location to location was a bit tedious. If the map was improved, and certain parts of the scene you knew for certain weren't usable after the first time you investigated them not show up in the investigative view, would have been a nice quality of life change. Still, these flaws are incredibly minor, and don't really ruin the gameplay flow as a whole. They just sometimes nagged at me when I really wanted to get to a location quicker, and I had to tab through different areas to get back there. However, outside of those things, and two story moments involving a country gal, and then another involving a bird, I never had too much trouble putting each piece of evidence together, only stumbling once or twice before my brain finally clicked. The visuals were the definition of charming and classic. They had a very soft and independent feel to them, even though the game is an HD re-release of an incredibly popular series. It all just had a very pleasing look to each of the character portraits, backgrounds, and CGs on offer. All the characters were unique, expressive, and fitting for their personality. I loved all the expressions each character emotion had, some being completely humorous and typical anime, which I thought would be jarring at first, but it felt completely natural. Quite a few of them got me to burst out chuckling at how character-like they were, but it didn't take me out of the more serious moments because they rarely happened when something serious was happening, thankfully. Each song of the OST is ingrained into my brain like most other aspects of the game, and I don't think I'll ever forget them. Each song had a very strong presence, but my favorite had to be the ramping up alert-like song that played when a major breakthrough was discovered or uttered. The sound effects were also good, even if used a bit sparingly compared to the music tracks, and nothing sounded bad, which, as you know, I always enjoy in a visual novel because I feel it adds more to the atmosphere. I am also so incredibly happy that there is no voice acting, as imagining how everyone sounded added so much more immersion and charm to the story and characters, instead of having lines be bogged down by bad line reads or the like. Now, we are going to get into the spoiler section of the video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, naturally, jump to the timestamp provided on screen. Everyone who hasn't played the game or doesn't want to be spoiled on an amazing game that they should definitely go play right this second gone? Good. Let's get on to the spoilers. First off, I cannot believe they killed off Mia as early as they did. I know they had to do it so they could introduce Maya, but it still shocked and saddened me. I actually didn't mind Maya's spirit linked to her, and I thought the possession-like moments were actually quite unique, and they never felt too out there for how grounded a lot of the game felt. The third case was definitely the weakest case in the game, solely because it began to drag, but the whodunit angle of it was definitely what elevated it from becoming a disappointment, and the ending team-up of Wright and Edgeworth was grin-inducing. The final case was a perfect way to wrap up the game, with all your questions answered, a happy ending for everyone, and a perfect close to the original game's story. The final group photo still makes me warmly smile anytime I think about it. Also, I adore the after-the-fact interviews with everyone we met over the course of the game, and I was so glad that everyone's lives went well after the events of the game. And with all that said, if you like visual novels, puzzle games, courtroom dramas, or murder mystery comedies, then you simply must give Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney a read and playthrough. It captures everything you could hope it would about the battle of wits in a legal system perfectly, and keeps you invested through the 13 or so hours it might take you to play and read through. Filled with an unforgettable cast of everyday heroes, perfectly done mysteries, and a quick pace that makes you forget how long it truly is, this is a perfect start for anyone looking to get into visual novels, and of course veterans of the genre who might have missed this. With very few flaws as a series, this was the perfect start, and I'm so happy that it became a series. It more than deserved it. As always, if you want to help support the channel, please consider sharing the video with a friend or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them down below as I read and reply to everything. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!